begin, you know, this whole idea that a magistrate, and by the way, Centrica say they will stop requesting these orders, but we'll see what comes of that. But your electricity provider, your gas provider, can easily get a magistrate's order, and somebody can almost, you know, forced entry into your home and put in place a prepayment meter. And what people are paying on that is far more than they should be, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's a sort of underhand way of cutting people off. You know, in the sort of bad old days, a electricity company, you didn't pay your bill, they could come and cut you off. And, you know, governments tried to stop that because it was putting very poor people in sort of living in insanitary conditions. So what they do now is there's a break into your house, change your meter for a prepayment meter, but then you've got to buy the sort of vouchers. You can't get hold of the vouchers, and you pay more. You know, people end up being cut off. It's a sort of backdoor way of people cutting people off of the power.
Now, we have heard stories, and particularly with that cold snap that we had before Christmas and projected another one to come starting next week, we did get stories of people that were cut off around the country. Do we have any idea of the magnitude of that?
Well, it is very, very large number of people. But you know, it's not just the numbers; it's the sort of people. I mean, in the Times investigation, and it's thanks to the Times that we know about this.
Who did very good work on this, by the way?
Yeah, it was a woman. She's got a 4-month-old baby, 4 other children, trying to bring them up in a 1-bedroom flat. She was on, quite a good deal with an energy company 2 years ago. That company went bust, and without any choice, she was shunted on to Centrica, British Gas, and her payments increased 7-fold. And unsurprisingly, she was unable to pay them. So what happens then? You know, bunch of debt collectors arrive at the door, break in.
I mean, come on, heavies.
Heavies arrive at the door. I was thinking of a polite way to say it.
No, don't.
And change a meter. And, you know, the other thing, you know, government has sort of helped us out this winter with this sort of £400 handout and also through the energy price guarantee. But that £400, that's not getting through to people, to many people who are on prepayment meters. Because, you know, you and I, we have, you know, our energy accounts. The government just stuffs our account automatically with this money, whether we need it or not. But if you're on a prepayment meter, you've got to sort of claim those vouchers and redeem them at a shop and so on. And the money's just not getting through to the people who really need it.
And, you know, I talked already about direct debits and people finishing up with massive surpluses with all these companies without even knowing it. I got a case today of somebody whose meter's faulty and they're saying, well, we'll install a smart meter. Well, he said, no, they're going to fine him for putting in a conventional meter. I've got Thames Water threatening me, letters every fortnight, that unless I get a water meter, you know, I'm going to start paying a higher tariff. It seems, and getting back to the central debate we're having tonight, that these companies have been given, through legislation, the most astonishing power.
They have, and you look at these smart meters, they'll sort of try to sell them to us on the grounds that they'll save us money. That's a load of rubbish. The reason smart meters are being installed into houses is twofold. One, it's easier to put people onto prepayment deals. They can do it remotely. But also, it enables in the future for Uber-style surge pricing to be introduced in the electricity system. And the reason we're going to have this is because government's trying to build a national grid on renewables, intermittent wind and solar, and when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you know, the amount of energy being generated collapses. At the moment, we're coping because we turn the gas power stations up and down in order.
And we're now getting ready for some coal-fired power stations to perhaps get bought back.
But from 2035, government said it's going to eliminate all gas-fired power stations, all fossil fuels, and we don't have the storage, we won't have the backup, and the only way the government's sort of trying to sort of make up this gap is through sort of managing demand by trying to tell people to turn off their dishwasher
We'll
for a couple
pay
of
you
hours.
to turn off the electricity. That was what was happening a couple of weeks ago.
At the moment, it's an incentive, but in future, it will be the other way around. It will be a penalty, surge pricing.
Yeah, it was the beginning of rationing, was my view. Now, America is not going down the net zero route, but is going down massive subsidy route. Does that disadvantage us?
It does, hugely. You look at... There's a company in Oxfordshire or Bedfordshire which manufactures electric vans. It's now suddenly going to switch its production to America. Why? Because in Britain, there's huge, the energy prices are being driven up and up. In America, on the other hand, Joe Biden wants to chuck a great subsidy at it. So it's thinking logically, how can we survive, thrive as a business? We'll go to America. And you think, net zero was supposed to be about all these green jobs, boosting the green economy.
We endlessly hear that net zero will bring huge benefits to the British economy. Yeah, all I can see is refining closing, chemical plants closing, aluminium smelters closing. I mean, this narrative, and I'm looking at the building from which it emanates, with a huge amount of media support. How do we counter this, Ross?
Just by telling people the reality of, the fact that the government has, not just the government, Parliament, nodded through this net zero target without even a vote in Parliament. No vote. And without any idea of how the government was going to get to net zero. It couldn't tell us then in 2019. It still cannot tell us. The Treasury was asked to come up with a figure, the price of going net zero. It couldn't do so. Said it's too difficult. We don't know how we're going to get to net zero, and therefore we cannot put a price on it. And yet it's written into law. Joe Biden's don't put that.
Your book, published today. Let's have a look. Give us a flash to the cameras.
There we go.
So, not zero. So, Ross Clark, what does this book tell us?
I just started off asking myself the questions that MPs should have asked themselves before they nodded this through Parliament, but failed to do so. And I've looked at, how are we going to get there? I've looked at housing, I've looked at transport, I've looked at energy, I've looked at industry, section by section. And what you find all the time is there's a possible technology there, but it's very, very expensive. It hasn't been scaled up. And here we are. We've got 27 years to eliminate all these
I was hearing in 2000, Nigel, don't worry about wind energy because the battery storage is just around the corner. And here we are in 2023 and we're no closer.
Well, here's... Just chuck a couple of figures at your listeners. Pacific National Laboratories looked around the world at the cost of generating energy from wind is approximately $50 per megawatt hour. That's fairly similar to what gas was before the spike. To store the energy in lithium batteries, $300 per megawatt hour. It's 6 times as much. And of course, if you're going to use stored energy, you've got to pay to generate it, and then you've got to pay to store it. You do your figures.
Well, I've got to say, Ross, good luck with the book. Thank you for coming on this show on a regular basis and helping us with some of these numbers. And for those of you at home, we present on this show all sides of this debate. But, I think my opinion. I think the rush to net zero is absolute madness. It's a self-inflicted wound upon this people, particularly amongst those on low incomes. And all the while, China build 80 new coal-fired power stations every year.